Hi, this is The Philosophical Angle, and I'm your host, Chris Angle. I'm the author of 4 books on philosophy, one of which is The Philosophical Equations of Economics. They're free for viewing at www.philosophypublishing.com. Along with me is my discussant and friend, Rick Samuelson. He graduated from Yale, has an MBA from Wharton and an MA from Tufts. Rick is an independent investor in the venture capital field. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
The purpose of the philosophical angle is to examine the nature of the concepts being used in current media and compare the essence of the concept with the usage and circumstances in which they're being used. Today, our discussion is going to be the pros and cons of ObamaCare. So let's get started. Well, taking a quick look at the chart here, there's quite a few cons and compared to the pros on whether this thing is good or bad for the nation. So the first thing we need to note is that ObamaCare comes with it about 21 different types of taxes. And examples of these taxes are a 3.8% surcharge on investment income, a 0.9% surcharge on Medicare taxes for high earners, 10% tax on tanning services. Where that came from, who knows, and why the tanning industry was targeted, I can't imagine. 2.3% excise on medical equipment. This is a big deal. A lot of the companies have been affected by this that produce medical equipment. It's almost like a contradiction. You're trying to bring lower cost to the medical industry, to the health industry, and you're raising taxes on those who provide products to the medical industry. Taxes on flexible savings accounts and health savings accounts. Also the same thing. These helped reduce costs. But taxes on the very things that reduce costs will drive, of course, the prices up, the cost of them. 40% tax on health coverage that are greater than the designated cap established by the government. Same criticism. 3.5% user fee for those getting new health care coverage. It also taxes or takes pre-existing new clients onto individual health plans. This is something that's probably not reported in the news, but much of the pre-existing health problems that are on group programs provided by companies are accepted. But individual plans are medically underwritten for the individual, and thus pre-existing conditions are generally excluded from obtaining the policy. Also, another problem with ObamaCare is that there's an independent payment advisory board which is going to look into possibly cutting services and payments in order to keep the budget balanced or reduce costs in this new government program. And thus, plans will change and premiums will rise. Before we get into the pros, I'd like to read you a letter. And when I say that plans will change, because one of the facets of regulations inside the ObamaCare is that they have to match certain criteria of the government, and when they don't do it exactly, a new plan has to be developed, and thus people with present individual insurance that aren't exactly commensurate with the guidelines put out by the government, they will have to get new insurance, or the plan will change. And here's an actual letter of what is actually happening to these people who have individual health plans. Starting January, and this is from Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield to one of an individual policy owner. Starting January 1st, 2014, we will no longer offer or renew the individual health benefit plan you currently have, Luminous HSA. We're making this change in an effort to offer coverage with more comprehensive benefits. By moving to a health care reform, also called the Affordable Care Act, compliant plan, you will enjoy all the benefits made possible through the new health care reform laws. To make this easier on you, we have pre-selected a new plan that will allow you to enjoy all the benefits made possible through the new laws. We will send you more information soon, including benefit information and rates for this new plan. You don't need to take action now. Your individual health benefit plan is still in effect until January 1st, 2014. You don't need to make a decision now. You can wait until we send you information on the plan we've pre-selected for you. This individual went and took a quick look at the website of Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield and suddenly discovered that the premium will increase by well over 50%. Okay, let's get to some of the pros. Subsidies, up to 400% of the poverty level. So if a person comes and wants to get a personal health policy, they will receive a subsidy, which will make it much more affordable for them if they are low income, up to 400% of poverty level. Pre-existing, okay. If you're already sick, no problem. And there's a designated cap on the cost. That is a price control. Okay, great. The uninsured become insured. CHIP is expanded. That's the Child Health Care Program, Child Health Insurance Program. Medicaid is expanded to 138% of poverty level. Medicare expanded. Tax credits to small businesses of less than 25 individuals to help incentivize the possibility of them bringing a group health policy to their employees. So that's a quick outline. So the government institutes a program of comprehensive health insurance for everyone. And we've just took a quick look at the pros and cons. But who will pay for this? Because we noticed that the plans are changed, they're going to be more comprehensive, the cost is going to increase, taxes are going to require that somebody pay for all this. How much money? Well, but you have to remember that money is backed by production of the people. So the people are going to pay for this from their daily sacrifices of going to work. And as we know, everything that the government is involved with, it's a costly situation. So government health will be the reward, and the people production will be the sacrifice by which we will be able to bring this to fruition. But government is, by its nature, inefficient, and so it'll be costly. But there's another hidden cost here that we haven't discussed in the pros and cons, and the obvious pros and cons that are dealt with in the media. There's one more hidden cost: coercion. The government is coercing you to buy health insurance if you don't already have it. And it does this by tax and a penalty. Who knows what that is? Everybody's been trying to argue whether it was a tax or whether it was a penalty, and no one came to any conclusions. Supreme Court came to one conclusion. The administration called it another in its briefs. Who knows? But it's a tax and a penalty. In other words, money, the cost of money is forcing people to make a choice. I would like to contend that this is truly unconstitutional. And not only that, it's anti-common law. And what do I mean? What do I mean by that? Well, common law has a couple of pillars to it, and one of them is property rights. People naturally have property rights. It's a natural right, including the right to one's own labor. And if labor is conscripted by the government, by it forcing you to do something that you would not otherwise have done, it is a form of slavery. It's limited slavery. And thus, we can conclude here that Obamacare is limited slavery. You are working for the government on your sacrifice for the purpose of government health care. The government is coercing individuals to take an action unheard of in a free society. The Constitution permits the government to implement general policies for the benefit of the general welfare. It's right in, I believe it's Section 8, Article 1 of the Constitution. Congress shall pass laws that for the benefit of the general welfare. But that is, the general welfare is for general actions. An example, national defense. It will pass a law for appropriation of, we'll build a new aircraft carrier and order some jets for the general welfare of the defense of the nation. A general policy concern. For the post office, they'll establish post office. It's right in the Constitution. Infrastructure, it's right in the Constitution to establish roads. Post roads, I believe is the word. But it doesn't allow for individual actions, coercive actions. And that's the reason for the Constitution, is so people can avoid oppression, government oppression. An example would be this Obamacare. Another example would be, let's say government, if it has this right for individual action, then it can make you do anything. Its power is unlimited. And I believe the general purpose, as described by Madison, is not for unlimited power of the government. And that's the reason for the Bill of Rights. So I've talked enough. Let me get an answer. Let's get a reaction from Rick and see what he thinks of Obamacare. What do you think, Rick?
Well, I guess the current problems they're having with the web page and cancellations and policies and the general uproar surrounding that speak to your first point, namely that government is inefficient. And I mean, you can see that whenever it's faced with the challenge of implementing a complex system, political considerations inevitably intervene, and mistakes are made, and compromises are made in terms of implementation that shouldn't have been made. And I suspect, the bigger challenge facing Obamacare at an operational level in the near future will be security breaches, because given the way the program was structured and the degree to which it was cobbled together, it's kind of a hacker's dream. So I guess my first point would be that this is a kind of glaring example of a program that's too big, too complicated, and not suitable for the government to implement. And we're seeing that laid bare before our very eyes.
Well, yeah, you
at
mentioned
a deeper
too
level,
big.
I'm sorry?
I say, yeah, you mentioned too big. Isn't the healthcare industry something like 16, 17, 18% of the entire U.S. economy?
Well, that's correct, yes.
So it
but at a more fundamental level, in terms of achieving the overriding aim of reducing the growth in healthcare costs, delivering healthcare as broadly as possible within that context, clearly if you strip out incentives for people to choose, then the net result ultimately in aggregate over time is that the overall cost of healthcare will continue to grow unabated and will become even more unaffordable. And so in that sense, at a conceptual level, the approach is wrong.
Well, this is pretty interesting. You're equating a relationship, or you're noting a relationship between choice and affordability?
Exactly. The big hubbub of the people surrounding the people that have had their health care canceled, and they tend to be those that have individual plans, is that, and the defense of the administration in response to this is that, yes, we are canceling your plan, or the insurance company is canceling your plan, but that's because we're going to provide you a better one with more services. Services that in many cases you don't need, but you have to pay for it anyway in order to make the broader plan work.
Okay, so some people get the benefit of the broader program, the better program, and others who don't need it are paying for something that they don't need. Is that how I read your statement?
That's the gist of it. It's confiscatory to that extent. So in order for the government to cover adequately its promises for broader health care to people who are going to be subsidized, in aggregate, they're going to end up forcing the insurance companies to charge more to people who are paying for services that they didn't desire before Obamacare was instituted. It's coercion.
Right.
As you rightly point out, it's coercion.
Next year, the problem could be exacerbated because right now it's only for the individual mandate, that is, those individual policies that exist that are being canceled. But next year, and I guess a year from now, the employer mandate comes into being, comes into play. What do you think will happen there? Will prices for employer insurance go up? And will companies pay for it?
Well, we've seen already that certain corporations, IBM comes to mind, are canceling or modifying their current policies and forcing people to go to the exchanges because the overall cost to them of abiding by the affordable, quote-unquote, Affordable Care Act is too great, or that's at least what they're saying. I suspect there will be a lot more of that over time. I suspect that companies, having worked for corporations for many years, will find a way to get as many people off of their roster as possible, at least in a technical sense. And we've seen this already. They'll be moved from full-time to part-time or nearly full-time, or they'll be recategorized in a way that minimizes the cost of the corporation. So you're going to see a bunch of that kind of stuff as well. In aggregate, it has to be that the corporate plans will in general offer less of a Cadillac-style health coverage than they had before, because that kind of health coverage is going to be more costly.
Won't they have to conform with the Obamacare guidelines on what is contained inside the policies? Which I understand
Generally,
is,
yes.
And isn't that fairly comprehensive? So I wouldn't expect that they can go below that level of comprehensive care.
That's right. It's kind of a straitjacket.
Okay. So you mentioned IBM. So what did IBM do that regarding this?
Well, they're amongst a number of companies that have either reduced the plans on offer or canceled them entirely and forced their employees to go to the exchanges.
Okay, they will give a certain amount of dollars to compensate this action, and they don't want. They see an increase in their costs, and so to avoid this, they're giving employees cutting their health insurance, and then making them go out into the individual market and get health insurance. Is that correct?
Through the exchanges, yeah. Through Obamacare.
Right, through the exchanges. Are the exchanges the only way to get individual health insurance? Can you call up Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield or another provider that are not on the exchanges and get your health insurance?
Well, I think the net effect is that you go through the exchanges to get to the insurance companies that are offering their programs in particular states. So it depends a bit. My understanding, based on the press reports, is that there may be more or less insurance companies offering up insurance packages that conform to the requirements of the Affordable Care Act, depending on the state that you're in. So there may be 4 or 5 in one state, there may be 2 in another, or there may be more in yet another. So that's not an easy question to answer.
What do you think is going to happen to the healthcare industry in general, or the insurance companies in general? Do you think they're going to be able to stay in business? Because I understand quite a few of them did not join the exchanges, and only...
Well, I think a lot depends on who signs up for this thing, particularly younger, healthier people. Because if they don't sign up and they just elect to pay the penalties, and similarly with corporations, if they just elect to pay the penalties, the government is going to have to react, because then financially the program will become insolvent or unworkable fairly quickly. And so the question then becomes, are they going to raise the penalties to force people and corporations into this program? How will the government respond if it doesn't? What if there are more security breaches? There have been some already, by the way, and that scares people away. Will they have to delay as many Republicans are calling for. I think this is events are coming to light on a daily basis surrounding the rollout of this program that make it too difficult to forecast exactly what's going to happen and when. I suspect it's going to remain a very messy, iterative process with the government making certain promises. The promises get broken in terms of the rollout. People get scared off, and the government has to respond and raise the penalties or otherwise provide incentives for people to sign up. It's going to be messy.
Well, I'd like to, I think that and predict that the exodus from the healthcare will cascade next year with the employer mandate coming online, and there'll be a lot more companies like we just discussed cutting the health insurance and having their employees go into the individual market. And I believe that was the actual intention all along of the administration, because it'll cause havoc, as you've mentioned, and when havoc becomes great enough, the government will step in and become a single payer. In other words, the government will then take over the entire healthcare industry, and you'll have a system that will be similar to what we have in England and Europe. Any concluding remarks, or we have about 1 minute left?
Well, I think that was Mr. Obama's intention from the beginning. Whether he succeeds through fomenting an entirely avoidable crisis, well, that remains to be seen. I don't think very many people are going to be happy with how this turns out in the coming months.
Okay, Rick, I want to thank you for joining us. And thank you for you, the viewer, for joining us this week on The Philosophical Angle. See you next week.